But they still won't see anything, right?
No, once I hit the button, they'll be able to see. They'll be able to see you guys. So you got to be ready to either talk or hang out for a couple.
Who's going first?
Wait, Amanda, then isn't that different than what we've done in the past?
In the past, we've never like gotten our stuff together in order to do it ahead of time. I actually have never, in all of my Zoom meetings, been able to do it ahead of time. So we can start like right at 6. If you guys want to go right on the knob at 6 o'clock, I can let people start coming in. And then if you want to wait, Nolan, maybe 30 seconds to let them all filter in. But then just know you're on camera, and if you're
Wait, I'm gonna sit here for 30 seconds.
okay, like
just being observed.
7 seconds. Count to 7.
Count to 7, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, but you got to signal me, right? Because I will sit here like a total doofus, just blinking dead-eyed into the screen for an hour.
I feel like that's pretty normal for these kinds of things.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally inured from online awkwardness. I'll be fine with it, but I don't think it will set the tone for the respect that you as speakers deserve.
Do one of you guys want to go first, or do you not care either way? Make it a surprise.
I don't care.
Nope, doesn't matter to me.
Anthony will have you go first.
Okay.
Flip a coin. I'll introduce both of you. So, go through and Nolan's going to introduce the series. I'll do the land acknowledgement, and then I'll introduce both of you. And I had Kayla's bio at the top of the page. So Kayla, and then we'll start with Anthony, even though your bio is going to be second. So I also creeped on your LinkedIn profile and added stuff. So.
Okay. And you want to also talk about like our path to get to law school too, like not just law school.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful.
Okay.
Get rid of my ticker mug.
So it's 6 o'clock, Nolan. I'm gonna push the button now, and you're gonna count to 7.
So from now, I'm counting to 7.
Once my video disappears.
There we go. Okay, great.
Count to 7 after you lose sight of me. All right. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you all at the end once I kick everybody out.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event for All Rise, a UWGB Civil Liberties Lecture Series. My name is Nolan Bennett, and along with Professor Elizabeth Wheat, we are very happy to have you here. On behalf of UWGB, I want to acknowledge the First Nations people who are the original inhabitants of the region. The Ho-Chunk Nation and the Menominee Nation are the original first people of Wisconsin, and both nations have ancient historical and spiritual connections to the land that our institution now resides upon. Today, Wisconsin is home to 12 First Nations communities, including the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, Forest County Potawatomi, Ojibwe Nation Community, Stockbridge, Munsee Band of the Mohicans, and the Brothertown Indian Nation. We acknowledge the First Nations people of Wisconsin. We'd also like to thank the Menard Center for the Study of Institutions and Innovation, who have sponsored this series. Their mission is to promote the study and discussion of civil liberties and related institutions and innovations through scholarly inquiry, educational activities, and community outreach. This, if you've been keeping track, is our 3rd event this semester. So thank you so much to those of you who've attended in the past for tonight. And we do still have one more session this semester, so please do keep your eyes on your inbox. With that, let me turn things over to Professor Wheat to introduce our wonderful speakers for tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited about both of our speakers tonight. It's always exciting to feature alums, but particularly 2 alums that I've worked with quite a bit their entire time at Green Bay. Starting with Kayla Billett. Kayla is a 2nd-year law student at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. She attended the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, where she earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Policy and Planning and a Master of Science in Environmental Science and Policy. Kayla decided to go to law school to pursue a career in environmental law and has most recently clerked for the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy during the summer of 2020, where she's had the opportunity to conduct legal research and prepare memoranda on issues in front of the Minnesota Supreme Court, such as the approval of a gas power plant subject to environmental review. Kayla is also an editing associate on the Mitchell Hamlin Law Journal of Public Policy and Practice and an intern for the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission in their legal unit, which is responsible for preparing regulatory orders and conducting rulemaking involving public notice and comment procedures. Our other guest is Anthony Sirianni. Anthony graduated from University of Wisconsin-Green Bay in 2015. As a student at UWGB, Anthony majored in environmental policy and planning, public administration, and political science, where he's also a mock trial champion in nearly every single class I had. After UWGB, Anthony attended Beijing Normal University, where he studied ecological environmental protection and management, and graduated in 2017 with a master's degree in environmental science. Currently, Anthony is a second-year law student at Rutgers Law in Newark, New Jersey, and competes on the law school's appellate advocacy team. And he's also an executive board member of the Moot Court Board. He serves as associate editor of the Rutgers Law Record and has clerked at the Eastern Environmental Law Center and has been on the board for the Clean Water Action Council of Northeast Wisconsin. We'll have Anthony will talk for a bit, and then Kayla will talk for a bit. So be thinking of questions. Feel free to type those in the chat. And after both speakers are done, we'll take the rest of the time for questions. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Wheat. I'm happy to be here. I'd like to start with a little story about my journey to law school, because it was not the standard kindergarten to law school experience. Initially, I had no idea I wanted to go to law school. I mean, actually, I had no idea I wanted to get a bachelor's degree. I am from Michigan originally, and I came to Wisconsin to study wind energy technology at Lakeshore Technical College. After a year, I got a job working on a wind farm out in Pennsylvania. I really liked the job, but I realized that the local community despised the wind farm workers to the point where we could not wear decals on our truck or our uniforms off-site because the locals would destroy our property. So throughout my experience working in Pennsylvania, I decided, I started thinking about how I would do it better if I was a part of the study or the planning process of this renewable facility. So I started making the gears change in my head to think about, how could I get a greater role in the renewable energy field? And so I started researching universities, and I found at University of Wisconsin-Green Bay had a program of environmental policy and planning. I thought, perfect, environmental policy, that's something that could help me. And so I started pursuing my undergraduate degree. While at Green Bay, as Dr. Wee had mentioned, I picked up 2 other majors, and I became involved in the school. I became involved in student government. I was on the executive board for the Environmental Affairs Committee, and I started interning in the community. So I interned at Clean Water Action Council. Later, I became a board member, and I worked at the Wisconsin League of Conservation Voters. I think these 2 experiences really started making me think about my future after Green Bay, and I started thinking about law school. But because I wanted to pursue a career in environmental law, I thought, it's kind of a complicated area. I wanted a stronger foundation in it. So before law school, I decided I wanted to get a master's degree. And that led me to pursuing a master's degree in environmental science, as Dr. Wee said, over in China. So I spent 2 years in China for my master's degree. I focused my thesis paper on environmental policy. So in China, their policy for their economic plan right now is revitalizing the ancient Silk Roads. It's the One Belt, One Road initiative. So basically, there's one route that'll go from China through the Middle East up to Europe for a trading route. And then the other route will go through Southeast Asia, up through the Red Sea, and go to the Mediterranean. And because it involves such a large group of countries and resources, I thought, how can we get ahead of future environmental issues? So I started researching environmental laws that maybe China could implement. I didn't really look at US laws too much because we only have 2 neighbors, Canada and Mexico. So I kind of focused on on Europe's approach to mitigating transboundary environmental issues. So environmental issues that go from one country to another country. And I stumbled across a law called the ESPO Convention. And basically, it mandates a strategic environmental assessment at the planning stage of any development. So that was really what I focused my thesis on. At the end of my degree, I started thinking about law school again. But before I went to law school, I decided I wanted to spend another year in China to study language, because I was kind of trying to teach myself Chinese the first 2 years, but I had a graduate program that took most of my time. So I taught English under the table, and I took a year of environmental language courses at the same university. After that year, during that year, I studied for the LSAT to prepare for law school. Unfortunately for me, in China or in Beijing, the LSAT was only offered one time. So I had one shot to take it before law school. And unfortunately for me, I got the flu right like the week of the test. And so I barely remember taking that test. And as you can imagine, I did not score too well. So I did not end up going to law school for that year after China. So I just changed gears. I came back to the US and I prepared for the LSAT again to take it at the next opportunity. And I took it, got a better score, and started applying to universities. I applied to Rutgers mostly because of its historical environmental issues. It's a very populated state. The industry's been around for a long time, and they have a lot of environmental issues. So I thought I want to go somewhere where I have a potential career as an environmental lawyer. Now that I'm in law school, I have participated in a variety of groups. So as Dr. Wee said, I'm in moot court, which is basically like a mock trial team for inside the university. So the first semester this past year, I participated in a moot court competition. It was an appellate style competition for the entire university. I was fortunate enough to make it to the finals, and I actually took second place. Beyond that, I became involved in a journal. In law school, typically journals and a moot court experience are the two things that a lot of employers like to see on your resume. So as a journal member at the very bottom of the totem pole, I'm basically an editor. So there's professors or lawyers in the field that want to publish their research paper, and they pass it on to a journal, and we basically go through all the all the sources that they've put, make sure the citations are correct, and basically polish it for publication. And then the last main thing that I've been a part of in law school is the national appellate team. So unlike moot court, where the competitions are internal, then there's two national teams at a typical law school. One's a national mock trial team, and one's a national appellate team. So these teams compete with other universities nationwide. So this current semester, I participated in the National American Bar Association appellate competition with this team. I competed against Emory down in Atlanta. I competed against University of Georgia, and I competed against Wayne State University. My team ended up taking 2 out of the 3, but we were unable to progress to the finals in Chicago. So next year, that will be the goal. There's also in law school a variety of student groups you can be involved in. As you can imagine, they take the role of a variety of different interests, from business to women's rights to the environment. So there is a environmental law organization on campus, and I became involved as a 1L, or the first year in law school, and currently I'm the treasurer. So it's a leadership position in the organization, but we don't really do too much now that we're participating in virtual school. My goals for after law school include becoming an environmental attorney. Hopefully I can do it semi early in my career. If not, I want to focus on litigation and appellate work, and then long-term goal is to get into the environmental field. I could talk a lot more about law school, and I can answer any of your questions, but I'll let Kayla take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for the great introduction, Dr. Wee. So hi, everybody. I am Kayla Billett. I was in the PEA program and the Environmental Science and Policy Master's program. Like Anthony, I was not a student that always knew I wanted to go to law school. The idea of it became more prevalent during my time at GB, especially in classes like environmental law and admin law. I enjoyed these classes a lot, although the mock trials scared the crap out of me and are probably still why I shy away from litigation. But what I did get out of the mock trial experiences at GB were that I love research, I love writing, and brief drafting and attention detail are something that I enjoy doing. And that actually is what litigation practice looks more like, since most cases don't go to trial. But my other point too is that from these mock trial experiences, it's the situations that are most comfortable or most uncomfortable where I've grown the most. So if you can really dig into those experiences. So during my final year in the master's program, my main focus was my thesis, and law school really wasn't on my radar, even though maybe it should have been a little bit more on my radar, but it takes up a lot of time. I pictured myself as a policy analyst or working in an advocacy position. I didn't really realize the trajectory that my master's thesis would put me on. I worked with Dr. Wee on her data set that she previously collected regarding judicial behavior and litigant success in environmental cases. I narrowed my research to nonprofit litigants in cases involving the Clean Water Act. I spent a lot of hours reading Court of Appeals cases, and I would catalog different characteristics, like which circuit court is it in, judge gender, was the appellant, a previous appellant in other cases. And I wanted to know why nonprofits were successful in appealing Clean Water Act cases. This research sparked interest and the realization that the legal field, or the impact the legal field has on environmental issues. So after my graduation, forgetting the torture of my thesis, just kidding, I was coaching cross-country skiing in Australia and also watching the show The Suits a lot. And that really affirmed my decision to pursue law school. But jokes aside, I took the summer to figure out where my strengths are, where my passions are, and like how I can best apply that to make a difference. And I decided that was law school. So I phoned the local law firm in Green Bay, Conway, Olenichek, and Jerry. And I actually interned there when I was in undergrad and my first year of grad school. And I asked if they could use a full-time intern assistant while I studied for the LSAT. And they welcomed me back with open arms. And I do have to say, if anyone has the chance to intern at the firm, I highly recommend it. I learned so much good and bad there. Many attorneys will straight up tell you, don't go to law school, don't enter this field, it sucks, I hate my life. But in the same turn, I could see them enjoying problem solving every day, helping their clients. There was a lot of reward in it too. And I think there's a certain level of griping required in this field. And I didn't let the naysayers persuade me from not going to law school, but I also took that caution as an indication to make sure that I had purpose and intent with what I wanted to do with my law degree. And for me, I knew that I have a passion for environmental law, and I developed a really technical knowledge through my time at GB. Excuse me. And my specialization and background in this and background experience would help me advance in this field and be able to find a job, because that's really important when you go and pay a lot of money for law school. So after graduating, I spent that year working and studying for the LSAT. And my only advice here, because I didn't do the best on the LSAT, is to invest in a study program, some kind of course that's going to keep yourself accountable. Having discipline after working or on the weekend to study was one of my biggest challenges. And if I could go back, and I would, because law school is expensive, and your LSAT makes a huge difference in your ability and where you're going to fall in that scholarship scale. So, and everyone's different, so take that with a grain of salt too. But for me, having accountability, relying on something beyond just my own self-taught through the prep books, I think would be a huge help. Also, my other tip is develop an exam routine. So practice taking the exam. I wore a watch and I would spin the dial to 12 at the start of each session. So I would be able to like track how much time I had. Because the problem is you can't fall behind, but if you do, you can't panic. So you're kind of, that having routine helps. The rest of the application process just looks like being the best you and following your gut. So I won't spend a lot of time on that. I applied to Marquette, University of Wisconsin, St. Thomas, University of Minnesota, and Mitchell Hamlin. I toured all of them except for U of M. And Mitchell Hamlin's campus was by far the least pleasing. It's actually an old all-girls boarding school located in St. Paul, and the halls can be very dungeony kind of. But it was actually the people and the community and the culture that really drew me to the school. Just even on my visit, I could just tell, the cohort between classmates was different than other schools I toured at. So, and that was definitely, that still applied when I first went there. So my section of 50 students was and is still super supportive of each other. And that became even more true as we had to transition online last year during my first year of law school. So the first year of law school was really fun and challenging, and it kind of depended on the day or the cold call, really. In my criminal law classes, we would often get randomly called on to answer questions about cases. I would get super nervous, my face would turn red, and my heart would race, and pretty much everything I knew was gone from my brain. And it almost got more intimidating with Zoom because everyone's staring at you, but you get through it. Sorry, see, this is happening now. I just think about it and I get nervous. But so also my first year, I didn't work. I wanted to put all of my effort towards my classes and try and really do my best there. If I had extra time, I would volunteer. Going back to my routine comment too, I found that treating law school like a full-time job worked really well for me. So I tried to basically schedule everything from an 8 to 5. So I can contain all of my reading, all of my outlining, all my classes in those hours, and that left, a normal lifestyle. I tried to not do things on the weekend, but generally you're gonna end up doing things on the weekend. And during finals and before deadlines of writing assignments, definitely extra hours go in there. During my second semester, my first year, I had the opportunity to start working at a legal aid for Anoka County in Minnesota, but that got cut short due to COVID. So that was I had 3 weeks of in-person legal experience. Everything else that I've had has been online, but you learn different skills through that. So it's still rewarding. Like Anthony, I really recommend getting involved in something on campus. I participated in the Environmental Law Society and a couple other things, and you just get to meet so many great people, and going to as many campus events as you can, because free food never helps. And more importantly, like the opportunities to connect with people and network can go a really long way, because you never know when you're going to meet somebody who has some position that you might be interested in, and there's a good word for you and you're on your way. So like Dr. Wheat talked about, during my 1L summer, I clerked at the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. This was a really cool first legal experience because it was basically my dream job. That's exactly where I'd want to be someday. But it was also really intimidating because of that. I felt like if I messed up, I would lose my shot. I'd never make it in this field. But that pressure is really silly at the same time too, because these firms know when they're hiring you as a 1L or even a first year associate, you don't know anything really. You're there to learn, you're there to support, to do your best, and that's all you can do. Imposter syndrome is alive and well in law school, and it's definitely impacted me, and I've had to kind of learn that I'm here because I can do it, I'm good enough, and I just have to put my best foot forward, and it's done well for me so far. Anyways, the summer MCA was really cool because I got to work on litigation that went to the Supreme Court and help do research on arguments that were argued in front of the justices. And while it was a really small part, it's really cool to be part of that. Another note, if there's any sciencey folks out there, please start to get in your head now that there's not always an answer in law. I really struggled with that, and I get frustrated with how many times professors say, it depends. You have to kind of let go of there's always a right answer mentality, and sometimes scientific writing style can get in the way too, but that actually can also be used as a skill and talent in the field as well. So also in my 1L summer, I wrote on to the Mitchell-Hamlin Journal of Public Policy and Practice. And just like Anthony, I am an editing associate, so I basically just review other people's work under tight deadlines. And writing on to a journal or law review is one of those things that people say, oh, it's what you should do. People hiring want to see that. I also feel really strongly that if it's something you're not interested in and you're going to dread it, don't do it. Your time is going to be better spent doing something you're more interested in, volunteering at, a clinic that you're interested in, or whatever that is. I actually really like doing site checking. So this is something you learn about the Blue Book. It's the greatest thing in the world. This is a nerd moment. Anthony's pulling his out, and you can tab it, and it becomes a wonderful thing. But like, I site check articles just to kind of relax. It becomes a calming experience because you can kind of shut off your legal analysis brain, and you just get to like follow the rules, which is really nice sometimes. That's when there's a right answer, is the Blue Book. That's probably why I like it so much. And the other thing too about the Blue Book and checking citations is it sounds silly, but it also makes you a really credible writer and a credible attorney. So that's going to go a long ways in your career. This spring semester, I'm also clerking at the Public Utilities Commission, which is the state's quasi-judicial decision-making body for basically everything energy regulation. I've loved the experience at the agency because I've been able to observe like the intersection between public policy and law. I get to work on rulemaking where I'm going through like each specific rule, making sure everything is so detailed, but it also, those nitty gritty rules also have like real life impacts, on everyday people. So that's been really cool to like actually see in practice. And one thing more specifically I've been able to see is the intersection between the energy transition to renewable energies and perpetuating systematic racism. So in one of my classes, we read a book by Shalonda Baker called Revolutionary Power. And Shalonda wrote that energy connects to every aspect of life, and the energy system defines nearly every aspect of socioeconomics and health, and that the energy system as designed disproportionately impacts Black, Indigenous, people of color, and low-income people. And low-income people face a higher energy burden. At my experience at the commission, I watched regulators make decisions, dealing exactly with this, with the COVID impact, with the economic impact of COVID. The commission asked utilities to submit proposals to alleviate economic impacts. And in these proposals, they needed to try and identify diverse suppliers and people of color and women workers. And it was really cool to see how a role that I could have someday, directly heals or hurts different communities. And also in the book, Revolutionary Power, the author talks about how social justice can't be left out of the equation to address climate change. And I just found that really powerful, as environmental justice is, a thing, I'm struggling a little bit today because I'm very close to the Derek Chauvin trial and the shooting that happened yesterday. So it's kind of lots of emotional. We just had a thing up on my phone talking about how we're in a how we have a curfew tonight. So I'm getting a little bit emotional, but this is why it's important, because I've really struggled with figuring out like what my role is through. So most of my law school experience has been influenced by racial injustice. And I've been lucky to have a supportive law school and community where we can talk about it and talk about what's going on and how it's impacting us. But I've struggled with figuring out where I fit in, what can I do in stopping the perpetuation of racism. And, but I figured out that like my interest in the environmental field can lead me there. So it started out as just being a young person that loved the outdoors and was curious about the ecosystem and how that all, connects. But I figured out how, the environmental movement leaves out people of color and many marginalized communities. And environmental justice has started to address, disproportionate effects of people of color, of pollution on people of color. But it goes beyond just the pollution of a petrochemical plant. And I agree with Shalonda Baker that there's a connection between, the specific issue of technical transition to renewable energy and uplifting communities hurt by systematic racism. And that's what's really cool for me, because I've found there's something really technical that I'm good at that I can do and make a difference. And I think it's beyond just, the transition to renewable energy. I think this connection exists with every area of law. And so I will conclude with, I hope that as you look into your future as a legal profession, that you can consider your role in creating equity as well.
Okay, so what we'll do at this point, feel free to type any questions you have in the chat. Nolan and I will kind of alternate questions for a little bit too, and then kind of pull in external ones as well. So I think we'll kind of start with what you mentioned at the end there, Kayla, in terms of kind of how we're seeing environmental justice be in our faces a little bit more. Like, we've known it's a problem, but we really, since George Floyd last summer, that it's in the national conversation in a different way. And I think issues of systemic racism are also being talked about differently. And I'm curious, for both of you, how you have seen some of those social justice issues discussed in law school, in your other classes, or, Anthony, if you want to add to with kind of your time in China from an international perspective on that too, and kind of how have you seen those discussions? Different, I think, being on the ground when it's 20 minutes away, but just to kind of hear a little bit about your experiences with that, particularly over the last year or so.
Oh, you go ahead, Anthony.
No, I have, I guess, a two-part answer. So first, I can address when I was in China. Some of you may have seen China has a pretty severe air pollution issue. My 2 years there, especially during the winter months, I spent most of my time wearing a mask. So this whole wearing a mask for COVID-19 is pretty second nature to me at this point. But what I did notice is that there was maybe it wasn't discrimination against minorities, because in China there isn't really that many minorities. I guess it's more of it between the haves and have-nots. So you notice a lot of like the lower class or maybe uneducated people are not wearing, or either do not have access to or are not wearing a mask when the pollution hits. It's really easy to walk down the street and you see a person driving a Lamborghini, and 2 feet away you see someone using the restroom on the side of the street with no mask. But I guess in there, it was really a difference between the financial resources. In Beijing, it has more millionaires than any other city in the world, at least at the time when I was there. It has surpassed New York City. And so there's a lot of money. A lot of people, education is very important. And there are a lot of private schools, and there's a lot of children that, have the benefit of, their parents' generation growing up through the educational system. But at the same time, when you're walking down the street, you see the children that are not having the access to the same educational opportunities. And you can see just the impacts of the pollution with just the high rates of respiratory issues, and what is the asthma. Asthma was very prevalent. I know when I was teaching English, a lot of the children had asthma that I think was directly influenced from the air pollution. In respect to law school, how the conversation is with the high profile qualified immunity cases, dealing with police officers in excessive force, whether or not Section 1983 is a qualified immunity amendment. But in my law school, I live in Newark, New Jersey, and there is no majority class. It's mostly minority. So it's kind of unique being in a university where, as a white male, I'm not the majority in the classroom or in the community. So a lot of the conversations are readily shared, and the discourse is open. Not just with students ourselves, but also with the faculty and the administrators. There's constantly weekly emails or monthly emails that are talking about social justice issues. And my university has a heavy focus on public interest. That's what most of the graduates at Rutgers Law go, as public interest careers. And so it's very much a conversation. And it's a focus of most of the students is to get into work to make positive change, whether that's at the police level or at racial issues.
Thank you. Kayla?
Yeah, I have a pretty similar. I see a pretty similar thing at my school as well. It's definitely not as diverse as Rutgers, but it's more diverse than Green Bay, I have to say. And that was something that I just, looked for and desired to in my legal education. It's interesting because during my 1L year, that's when you take, the very doctrinal classes, like, torts, crim law. And there wasn't a lot of discussion brought into classes. There was, maybe a few moments throughout the semester where discussion was created, but there was definitely discussion left to desire. As I've been getting into more of my upper level classes, like state and local government, energy law, administrative law, where we've honed in a little bit more on public policy, that's where the discussions really have flourished, which I think is great. But I also think it's something that needs to be pushed more, especially at my school. Just property law, that involves, different kinds of implications on equality.
So I'll jump in here. So something I'm really struck by is both of you have wonderful experience in the kind of academic side of law, both clerking, working in journals. And I was really struck, Kayla, by the quote, often there are no right answers within law, which is amazing because it kind of sits against the idea of research is always pursuing. So I was just curious to hear both of you think with us a little bit about the role of research in law. I mean, sometimes you find folks who are more engaged in the kind of combative, litigative side of law, some more in the clerking, knowing, of course, that those are two sides of the same coin. But just what you think of as the role of research in law and its importance.
I think it's really important. I've seen a lot of, just in discussions, and we have, it's called continuing legal education courses. I think all attorneys have to take them throughout their career to, continue their education. And as students, we can attend them for free. So I attend them all the time. And at these presentations, the attorneys or judges that are speaking are always citing to research. So I had a judge just giving a clinic on legal writing, and he cited probably, at least 10 different scientific research on, what is effective writing? How do you advocate on a position? And I think it's really important to inform, how you litigate, just how you practice, but also, what are the best policies? And I see that at the commission too. At these commission hearings, we have advocates from all different groups come and, advocate on behalf of their group in front of the commission, and that advocacy helps inform the commission to make a best decision. And a lot of this, and a lot of the, not data, but a lot of the advocacy comes from research and numbers and right answers that people can give. So I think it's really important. Thanks, like, really good question, because it definitely gets forgotten in the legal education when you're talking about torts and, you know, the basic stuff.
And as Kayla mentioned before, the standard legal answer is, it depends. That is the answer you will always hear an attorney say, because it really does. It does depend on a lot of things. And it's funny, in the legal world, even with your question on research, there is not a single straightforward answer, because it depends on your position. It depends on the venue, or what jurisdiction you're in, what level of court you're in. So for example, if you were at like a trial level court, the research you're doing is going to consist more of like a precedent background. So research on previous cases, and you're advocating how the prior cases apply to your position and why you should win based on the previous decisions. But then as you move up, so now when you're at like the appellate level, now those previous decisions at the trial levels are less important. They're more persuasive nature, right? So your research now is going to consist of a different focus to try to sway the panel of judges now that are at the appellate level. And then if you happen to go all the way to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, now precedent doesn't matter at all, because the Supreme Court can do anything they want. So now your research can pull in trends in the law, trends in the different circuit courts across the country. You can bring in maybe legal journal articles to say what the discussion among academics are. So the research, the importance of it, it's always important, because if you cannot back up your position with a sound foundation, if you can't back it up with the law, then you have no position and you're going to lose. But the focus of your research really depends on where you are and what your position is. But beyond just like your role as a litigator, that's kind of my answer was in the beginning. But you know, as an attorney or as a lawyer in the legal field, you can write legal, research papers, deciding whether or not maybe you think that a case was decided incorrectly at any level of the judicial system. And you could research how it conflicts with a volume of precedent from the last few decades. You could talk about how there's a split among the circuit courts, and which way, if it does get to the U.S. Supreme Court, which way the Supreme Court could or should turn out. You could research something like that. Or you could research stuff like, you know, how do we maybe eliminate or change qualified immunity and try to, you know, revamp the way we police the police. You know, like there's a lot of ways that research can be used outside of the courtroom, but still be within the legal realm. So it depends.
I've got a comment and then a question from the chat. So the comment is from Kevin. It says, great hearing your stories, Kayla and Anthony. Excellent job sharing valuable ideas for students and others to think about. I learned a lot. Anthony, I remember discussing your mask and the daily air quality when we met up near BNU. Thank you for sharing your experience. And then a question from Dean. And this will go for both of you, and we'll start with Anthony. How do you see the connection between environmental justice and our current dependence on fossil fuels and your future legal work?
Could you repeat the question? The
Yep.
very last part, please.
How do you see the connection between environmental justice and our current dependence on fossil fuels and your future legal work?
Well, it's a lot of interconnectivity for sure, and I think the one answer won't satisfy all parameters of that question. As for how I think I'm going to fit in the future, I think that renewable energy is becoming more and more viable as a perhaps substitution. We've already seen how just the way the fracking has increased or lowered the price of natural gas, and that's already done to like the petroleum industry. So changes can occur pretty quickly. I envision that I will be playing a greater role in renewable energy as the technology progresses, And I think the way that it could intersect with the environmental racism or issues of that sort is that historically if you were to look at a map and see where our industrial sites are located within a city, historically they're in the areas where poverty occurs, where the minorities are located. And I think that as we move forward with this cleaner technology, that the focus needs to be on where we're putting it. Yes, maybe the pollution or the potential within the communities is less, or maybe just of a different kind with the renewable energy fields, but we have to be conscious of where it's being placed, where it's zoned, where it's sited. And I think, when a lot of these, like the coal-fired plants were put in, we didn't have social media. We didn't have these abilities for normal people on the ground, these grassroots movements, to really shine a light into these decisions before they occur. So I think, just outside of the legal realm, as normal, members of our society, that when these conversations are occurring of a potential site for maybe a wind farm or a solar installation or a hydro dam, we need to have those conversations of where and why before the planning takes place. I think that's where maybe it's going to intersect between the historical issues with implementation of new power plants. As for my position, hopefully I'm working in the environment or the renewable energy field. If not, I see myself right now as more going into litigation, work like that. So maybe I want to work more on the enforcement part. So maybe my part could be working for like a nonprofit or a state agency and advocating on behalf of people who have experienced hardships because of environmental racism. I think the transactional side will be more for the actual implementation of a renewable energy field, because it's going to be a lot more contracts based and negotiations. But it's exciting because there's a lot of new avenues and ways to do it better than we did in previous generations.
That was an awesome answer, Anthony. Kind of continuing off of what you were saying too, when those conversations are being had, I think it's imperative that the communities that are being impacted are involved in the conversation, and the BIPOC communities are included in that. I think right now it's very surface level inclusion, and it's not actually, there are times that if they're included at all, often, what they're advocating for is not necessarily prioritized or listened to, it feels. Also, I would recommend, this is the book to read that is super, super helpful. Revolutionary Power is what I was talking about earlier. But she talks about how we can't make the same mistakes we did with the fossil fuel industry. And it is happening. We're putting solar fields in Native American like sacred land, and that there can be completely left out of the benefits of that solar power. So in the name of climate change, we can't just marginalize communities again. Specifically in my role, that's something that I want to make sure that I am being an advocate that is seeking out the voices that aren't being heard. And this summer I'm getting to work at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, so that's even more connected with environmental justice and fossil fuels, because they they provide the air permitting pollutions. So I'm excited to see how that all intersects. In my interview, it appeared that environmental justice was on their, a focal point for the agency, and so I'm really excited to continue that work and participate and see how that all works.
So it's evident from both of your testimonies that COVID-19 has had a unique and indelible impact on your study of law. And I recognize it's had a somewhat uneven impact on the environment as well. So of course, you've both nicely discussed today how it's made more apparent issues of environmental racism, but I also think of early reports of wildlife returning to parks that had not been there for decades, of emissions rates dropping. Do you have any insight as to what those of us interested in environmental policy, law, science should take away from this kind of unique point in American history or in world history?
I think one takeaway is that change or positive change is possible. We saw a similar thing after the 9/11 terrorist attacks when the airplanes were grounded for, I think it was about a week, and air quality levels were at charts that we haven't seen in normal times. So it's similar to that level where, if you bring up the discussion of how can we improve our community, how can we improve the environment, how can we improve, the ecosystems in our backyard, and a lot of it's well, there's nothing we can do. This is our reality. But what this has shown is positive change is possible. Like, maybe we need to scale back the amount of people that are visiting our national parks. Maybe we need to improve the trash collection. Maybe we need to maybe not limit how many vehicles, but we should reconsider the emission standards for our vehicles, because these are the things that are occurring less frequently during the pandemic, and these are the things that are actually improving. I know it's not in the environment, but another article that I had read was that in England, the seasonal flu was eradicated during the pandemic. COVID-19 is more contagious, so those cases are happening. But just by simply wearing a mask, we eliminated all the flu deaths and the flu occurrences for an entire season. That's incredible. Like, if you would have asked me a year ago, how do we, prevent deaths from the seasonal flu? I thought, well, it's just a fact of life. But it turns out it is possible to positively change that. So it just kind of, I use the word change a lot, but just changes the way that it gives us a new perspective on the limits of what, the so-called limits that we've given ourselves, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good question. And I would like to reflect on it more, but I also just kind of my initial thoughts are that, you keep hearing, oh, I want to get back to how it was or back to normal. And now we're realizing there's a new normal, and that new normal can actually be really good. Kind of relating it to the law school experience, I've only had online legal experience or legal externships. The majority of my classes have been online, and I've learned new skills. I've learned how to send emails better. I've learned how to be really intentional about having conversations with people via Zoom. And so that's, there's been things that have benefited from that, just like you're saying with, new species returning to parks. So I think change can be really hard, but it also opens us up to accepting better things as well.
All right. So this next one this is not fishing. Talk about any of your classes. I'm kind of curious. You just have had a lot with me, so I was like, this is not a fishing. You're not set up for this question. I'm curious if you could share a little bit about what you felt were some of your beneficial experiences at Green Bay. You're both doing very similar paths with law school, with kind of the research intensive and that sort of thing. But from your time there, whether it's student organizations or other opportunities you took advantage of or classes, what do you feel was some of those beneficial experiences from your undergrad time at GB?
Well, 100% was enrolling in law courses. So at GB, I took environmental law and natural resources law, both taught by Professor Wheat. And it was a new method of learning. I mean, it truly was. I can still remember some of my classmates grumblings underneath their breath that, why do we have to do it this way? We always write this way. We always read this way. We always respond to questions this way. But the truth of the matter is, if you are entertaining the idea of law school is completely different. It's different than my undergraduate and my graduate degree. I can highlight some differences real quick, and then I'll get back to the question. But in law school, professors expect you to read everything before stepping foot in the classroom. Typically in undergrad, I would receive my lecture first, and then I would read afterwards to solidify kind of what the professor had taught us. But at law school, it's a no-no, because they call it cold calling, but they're going to call you randomly, just Anthony, what is blah, blah, blah? And if you don't answer, well, one, you look terrible in front of your peers, but also you're losing credibility with the professor who could potentially write you a letter of recommendation or help you with your future. In law school, in most of my classes, you have one grade. It's your final exam. So it's very strange to wrap your head around. An entire semester's performance is based on one 4-hour exam. But there's an incredible amount of work that goes into the entire semester. Each week, you're reading hundreds of pages, you're highlighting, you're rereading right before class so that you can answer any random question that the professor could make. And then, of course, they make up a hypothetical statement that's synonymous to the case you read, and then they give you some random question and then drop it on you right there in front of everyone. And so you have to be able to react. So first, I think you should take some law classes undergrad. Both of those classes helped me tremendously. It was the first time I actually read cases for the first time in undergrad before I went to law school. In those classes, in those 2 cases or classes that I mentioned for undergrad, we also had a mock trial component. While in law school, I participated mostly in appellate competitions, but it's the same amount of work that goes into all that preparation, that research, answering questions on the fly in the moment. You really have to have a command of the information that you want to convey, and like a master of the knowledge to answer questions on the fly. Also, like outside the classroom, I think it's getting involved where you work as a team with people that are different than you. So I got involved in student government, something I never would have entertained the idea of. But I did it, and I worked along with a lot of people from different backgrounds, not just what I was interested in, to solve different problems. And I think that constant interaction. I sought out non-paid internships. You do what you can with the time available. I worked part-time at Walgreens in down the street on University Ave, but I did other stuff in the community to work with people, because once you get to law school, as Kayla said, you're going to rely on your peers. It's not butterflies and rainbows. It's going to be a lot of hard work, and in the beginning, because it's so different, you're going to be second guessing yourself a lot, and you're going to rely on the people around you to work together and try and lift each other up. So I think just enrolling, I guess enrolling in some law classes, getting your feet wet, and participating in extracurriculars where you're working with people.
Yeah, I would echo everything Anthony said as well. Taking those, law focused classes really helps just start to get you to be able to think like how you have to think at law school, because it's totally different. But also, in addition to, the law courses benefiting, which they immensely did. I had administrative law with Professor Nixon. I'm not sure if he's still teaching. But that class, I took it again. I took admin law again last semester, and I was heaps ahead of my classmates who are just learning what Chevron doctrine is, which we also learn in environmental law. So I did a little Chevron 2-step for people, but look up the video, the NYU Chevron 2-step video if you haven't. But the other huge thing that I've taken away from Green Bay that's really helped me is the technical sciencey classes. And I know this might be I think this is not geared towards the environmental side of things, but if you're in the environmental science program, take a few of the, hydrology or resource recycling, whatever hard classes, because those skills have been super remarkable for me to say, hey, I actually understand how water flows through a ditch system, or, I kind of understand it, and I couldn't really explain it that well, but, being able to talk about your specific, more technical experience, that actually has been super helpful for me in this field as well, because generally, even patent law, you have to understand engineering and things way more sciencey than I can understand, but having different backgrounds different backgrounds surprisingly help you in different areas of law as well.
Okay, in the last couple of minutes that we have, we are going to do a fun rapid fire question where we'll ask you favorite things. Kayla will go first, and then Nolan and I are going to alternate as well. So don't think too long, just sort of a quick fun reaction. First one, Favorite Supreme Court justice?
Ginsburg.
Ginsburg.
Okay. Favorite fictional attorney?
Lincoln lawyer, Matthew McConaughey.
I'm blanking on that one.
I figured you'd go with Suits on that.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Favorite legal podcast or podcast of choice?
Above the Law is pretty good. They have some good stuff for pre-law students too.
Yeah, Above the Law, and then it's not really a podcast, but you can subscribe to emails from different bar associations. So I have the New Jersey Bar Association and New York Bar Association.
So supposedly the current Supreme Court justices all pronounce writ of cert differently. What is your go-to pronunciation?
I say cert because I can't say the certiorari, writ of certiorari. So I always say cert.
I don't know if I've actually had to say it, so writ of certiorari is how I would say it, but probably wrong.
Favorite law, movie, or TV show?
Suits is good.
I'm blanking on the name, but Tom Hanks represents a German spy, and I don't know. It was a good movie. I can't even think of the name.
All right. And then I'll tell you, no one?
So this is a weird one. I'm a 90s kid. So when I think of environmental stuff, I think of Captain Planet, who, as we all know, famously summoned by the powers of wind, water, earth, fire, and heart. So if you have to pick one of those five as your powers, what are you going with?
I would say water because it is also snow and I love snow.
I would say fire because I'm from the Midwest and in the winter it gets pretty cold.
All right. And last one, your favorite or most memorable mock trial moment from class?
Anthony pouring water on the table
That was going to be mine as well.
and me losing.
Yeah, that one was that one was pretty good. I think probably my favorite. It was like halfway through one of our mock trials, and we had someone else that was supposed to do the closing, and they were worried about something. And I just said, you know what, I'll take it, and I just did it like right on the spot, no preparation, and it came out. It was like perfect, more than like because a lot of times on a closing, you don't want to prepare those anyways because you have no idea what's going to happen during the trial, and they were worried because the way that the trial was happening, what they prepared wasn't accurate. So I just, it's like, you know, screw it, I'll do it. And I stood up and I did it, and at least it felt good to me.
Oh,
I never knew that one.
I was also forced into a similar situation, but I don't think I was as gracious as Anthony about it. I think I was a little cranky.
Well, I want to thank, first of all, in addition to thanking you both for coming tonight, just say how incredibly proud we are to have you back. Having known you both for a very long time now, it means a lot to have you here. Incredibly proud of what you're doing and excited to hear where you go next. So with that, we will sign off for tonight. Thank you everybody for coming and hope to see you at our 4th and final series in May.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I completely forgot about the water. I poured the water on the table.